All right, all right. Welcome back to another episode of the Behind the Back podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Marcos Codenegron, and beside me here, as always, is Ben, the Jet Rets. Ben, how are you, brother?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm doing good. Just a lot of action going on. NBA Finals are officially set. Thank goodness. We weren't sure if the Minnesota series was going to be over by then, so it worked out perfectly. I'm really hyped to talk about what we got to talk about. We got a lot of fun stuff planned, y'all. We're talking and breaking down the conference final series. We got a Would You Rather featuring De'Aaron Fox. This will be our first segment doing that. And then we got to talk about the Mike Brown situation.
Yeah.
So with that, let's get down to it. We'll start with I don't know, as Chris Broussard would say it, a close sweep with the Boston Celtics sweeping the Indiana Pacers. Every game was like competitive, even the ones without Tyrese. I mean, the Celtics had to come back twice in the last two games. So yeah, at least it was competitive. But I mean, shout out to Indiana for at least making it there. I feel like this was kind of the result people were anticipating. And it sucks because obviously Tyrese got hurt in game two, and it just felt like they had opportunities in the series to kind of make it interesting, and it just didn't go their way this time.
Yeah, and I mean that's the Eastern Conference was essentially like an injury-ridden run for the Celtics, for the Pacers. I mean, for everybody. All those teams were feeling it, and like you can't use injuries as the excuse for why you lose, series and games and stuff. But it does play a factor. You do got to tip your hat to the Pacers, though. I know they got swept, but that series was competitive. They didn't get blown out in every single game. And yeah, like you said, like with Tyrese out, they still made it a competitive game. Like the Celtics still had to bring their best game. And it does beg the question, like the Celtics brought their best game and eked past a injury-ridden Pacers team. What is that going to look like against a, knock on wood, fully healthy Mavs team that is looking lethal right now? So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, but I do think like on the reverse side of it, we talked about going into this series how they haven't really faced any adversity, and I do think that those last two games where they had to come back from those deficits, I think were kind of a good thing for them. I think better for them than it could have been. I think that kind of gave them that wake up call, like, hey, we are the best team, but anyone can beat us if we're not playing at our best. And I do agree, like Jaylen Brown winning the Eastern Conference MVP was good for him. I don't think that was expected. He didn't expect it. That was a cool reaction the whole time at the podium when he talked afterward. He's like, yeah, I never win crap for, he's like, I wasn't expecting it at all. So I thought that was a really cool moment. But yeah, I think that this adversity is going to help them. But now that, both teams got good rest, so it's going to be pretty even going into the matchup in June 6th. So I'm excited for it.
Do you think JB was the best player in that series?
I do. I mean, Tatum had a few moments in there where he was really inconsistent. And
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of been the case with him for most of these playoffs. Like in the past couple of years, he's had like awesome playoff moments, and I feel like that's going to happen in the finals. But Jaylen Brown was the most consistent player, and like after the game one shot, like that was really cool. Like he had the kind of the hero moments where he kept this team afloat, especially when Tatum wasn't hitting the way he should. And that's their relationship. That's how it works for them. That's the whole point of having two top level dudes. It's very similar to Dallas and how they operate. So
yeah, and that's kind of the exciting part, like previewing. Obviously, we're going to talk about the finals next week, in next week's episode, but like a little sneak peek at it, like this is going to be a fun matchup just because of those two dudes. Obviously, the Celtics are going to be getting back Kristaps Porzingis, which is huge for them.
Huge.
But looking at Jaylen Brown and looking at Jason Tatum, and on the other side, Kyrie Irving and Luka, like that's, you put them in a 2v2, take out everybody else, and that's an interesting matchup in and of itself. So it's cool to see this matchup, honestly. But yeah, I thought that Jaylen Brown winning the MVP in that series I think it was the right call, because I think he was the most consistent throughout the whole series. It seemed like when you needed a bucket in this series, he was the guy. And I mean, shoot, he hit an insane, basically game winner against the Pacers. It was that shouldn't have gone in.
Yeah,
It
ludicrous
was
shot.
good defense by Siakam, yeah, and he just, for lack of a better term, just threw up a prayer, right? And
Hmm.
it went in, and it seemed like from that point on, like his confidence really went through the roof. And I mean, a confident player in the NBA is pretty terrifying, especially when it's in the playoffs that late. And yeah, I think him winning the MVP was a good decision by them.
Yeah, and again, overall, it was a good, entertaining series. And
Yeah,
again, for Indy, despite the injuries, they held tough and made it close. And that's all you could really ask for. We talked about them having their backs against the wall, and all they put in a better effort. I just don't, and that kind of happened in both series where both games, like both teams, were all close. They were all just close to each other, and the ball just went one team's way every single game. So I think for, we'll move off from the Boston Indy because that there wasn't much to talk about outside of that. Um, so let's go to Dallas and Minnesota, which was an insane series, like to say the least. Like yeah, I went 5 games, but every game was just intense, except for obviously game 5 was kind of a
yeah.
clunker at the end. But the intensity and the kind of signature moments that came from this series were really cool. And now I really was so impressed with just how well Kyrie and Luka fed off each other. I do think that they've kind of really pieced it together throughout this since the All-Star break on how this team is operating and everyone's role. Everyone's kind of accepted the role and guys have stepped up, and it's just been such a cool thing to see. Like I'm watching these games and it's crazy to see the way the Mavs operate, and the Wolves are giving it to them. It was a tough competitive series, but it just kind of shows like that was the star power that, yeah, the Wolves have Anthony Edwards, but he's like a step away from entering
Yeah.
that realm. Um, and this was Luka's, like he's done this before. Like he's beaten teams that in theory people thought better of, like when they dominated Phoenix in game 7 a couple of, playoffs ago. Like it was so cool to watch. Like Luka was the best player in the series, but having Kyrie there, they were so cool.
Yeah, and for this series, it was eye opening for me, because a week ago you asked me who I thought at the time the best player was, and I said it was Anthony Edwards, and I fully backed that. And to this day, I'll still say, like, I understand where I was coming from. I'll also be the first to admit it was not right. It was the wrong call. And yeah, I saw the experience really show with Luka in this series. I mean, Luka's done this dance here at the Western Conference before, at the Western Conference Finals before. He hasn't won it, but he's been there, and so he knows what it takes to not just be at this stage, but to make it to the stage and kind of preserve your body in a way, and not just getting to that stage and then turning it up another notch is a skill set that you learn as you play more and more years in the league. And that's that next step you talked about with Anthony Edwards. I mean, this was an amazing season for the Timberwolves and for Anthony Edwards for different reasons. For Anthony Edwards, ton of development right there in this playoff run alone, let alone this series. For the Timberwolves, I think it would have been a little more disastrous if they made the finals and lost, because it's like, well, now we've got to pay Karl Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards soon, and like we've got all these taxes and money and salary, blah blah blah, right? Like
Yeah.
now it's like, well, hey, we only made it to the Western Conference Finals and we didn't do as well as we wanted to, not even close to as well as we wanted to. Now do we move on from somebody? So there's questions going on there, but what they also learned throughout the season is that their main guy is Anthony Edwards. They went into the season thinking they had 2 guys for sure, like 2 main guys, and then potentially a third guy to like really lean on defensively, especially. But going into the season, like you're leaning on 2 guys and saying, who's going to step up? Who's going to step up? Well, it was clear by the end of the season who the best player on that team is. And so that's a building block. And that's now a direction that this team can take. They had an amazing season and they can totally build off this. Now, do I think they'll get better losing Karl Anthony Towns? That's such a tough call because it depends on who they would trade for, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's something like we'll talk about later. Obviously, if they were to make a trade, like it would probably take a lot, and I'd be curious to see what team would give up a lot. But I don't know what do you think? Do you think Timberwolves might blow it up at the end of the season.
I mean, if blowing it up means getting rid of Towns, maybe. I mean, there's been reports like Chris Finch came out and said, "Oh, we're gonna try and keep him," but I mean, it's always easier said than done. And when you watch it, the team kind of looked good at times when it was Naz Reid running out there and Rudy Gobert, and I don't know. I feel like Naz kind of offers the same style of play that Cat does, and and that's not a knock on Cat. I think he's an awesome player. But I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it. You're right. They have so many good pieces. Jaden's there, Anthony's there. They still have Rudy. Like, they have pieces to build around, and they can kind of retool. And with the way Anthony Edwards is as a person, I think, at least from what we see, his charisma, I think guys would want to play with that. Like, guys would want to play with this
definitely.
guy. So there might be a team in free agency that they're like, hey, maybe we'll snag a big name just because. So it'll be interesting to see where they go in the future. But I do think if Towns gets traded, or if they do decide to move on, it will be Towns. And Towns is good enough where he can slide into a lot of different situations and make it work. Like the Kings, for example, is a good spot for him, just for we could use the size and the shooting at that kind of level. Like, that would be cool. But again, it would be
would you take him next to Domas?
I would take him next to Domas. And I do. And, it's like, defensively, it's not going to make the biggest difference. But maybe in a different system, in a new offense, that we can utilize him in a lot of different ways, that we maybe he can provide that offensive punch down low that Domas can't. And while Domas runs up top, does the DHOs, we can still have Cat chill down low or hit threes. Like, he's a very versatile offensive player. So that's someone I would totally welcome on this team. And it's someone like the only other guys we kind of really have at that size are Keegan and Trey, who can really do those kind of things. And we kind of need more guys like that. So, that's something, we have a lot of free agent targets or trade targets for this offseason. But yeah, no, the Wolves are in a good spot. And I think it would benefit both parties if Cat were to move on. I do think that, like you said, going into the season, it was Cat and Anthony as like the 1 and 2 players. But once Anthony kind of ascended a little bit, I think Cat still had a role, but it was not the same. He did have that 150-point outburst where he was hitting every shot in the first half, but I don't know. I don't know if this team is I think he's the kind of that glue player that the team's now starting to grow out of, if that makes sense.
It does, yeah. Well, I want to put something in perspective. I talked about the experience that, that this Timberwolves team kind of lacked going into the season, just in terms of the playoff experience, right? Karl Anthony Towns was drafted in 2015. Okay. Since 2015, here's how the seasons have gone for them. In 2015, no show in the playoffs. 2016, no show. 2017, they lost in the first round to the Rockets. 2018, 19, and 20 didn't make the playoffs. 2021, they lost in the first round to the Grizzlies. Okay. 2022, lost in the first round to the Nuggets. This year, they sweep the Suns in the first round. It was they win a 7-game series against the Nuggets, and then lay an egg on the biggest stage that they've seen since 2004, when the big ticket, the kid, the franchise, Kevin Garnett, led them there. So I talk about that experience, and it really showed for me, especially seeing how many years Karl Anthony Towns has been with the Timberwolves and just how many losing seasons they've had. This was the biggest stage Karl Anthony Towns has ever seen, and he's been on that team for a long time now. And it begs the question, like, Anthony Edwards has only been there a couple of years now, and he's already kind of taken the franchise over. And it's like, it might be time that the Timberwolves move on from Cat.
Yeah, and again, it will come down to money too. Like, do they want to invest a significant portion of money into Cat? He's entering his prime. Like, he's still a very capable player, but that is something the team might want to consider. And that a lot of teams are in that position this year. Like, oh, we have a guy that if we sign him, this is the last big contract he's getting. And do we want to invest in a player like that? And Cat does have injury troubles, so that's also something you have to consider going into it. No, whether you're trading for him or you're running it back with him, like, those are the things you have to consider. For the Wolves, they made it work because they have Nas, and they have a very capable replacement. But some teams, if they invested in Cat, he gets hurt, they might not have the same level. So it would be interesting.
I thought Nas was pretty disappointing in this series. Like I just expected a little bit more out of him, considering what I see him do to the Kings every time we matched up against him. But especially reigning sixth man of the year now. I I wanted a little bit more from him, especially in that last game. I feel like they really needed to lean on somebody other than their two guys to really get it going. And like in the first quarter, they were targeting Rudy Gobert more than anybody. And I'm sorry, but that's not a recipe on the offensive end to win games. And
Yeah.
that really showed me like that they just didn't have what it took to get it done against the Mavericks in this series. And I mean, we talked about going in, we thought whichever way this went, it was going to go 6 or 7 games. And we felt pretty darn confident in that. And obviously, look at how the series ended. Hats off to the Mavs. But yeah, some runs have just got to end a little bit early, you know?
Yeah, and listen, it's hard when you're running into one of the, there's always a guy or guys that are just hitting another level. And Luka, I mean, he was a scoring champ this year. He's now has 5 All NBA first teams. He's 5-time All Star, and he was the Western Conference Final MVP. He's 25 years old, and like
Yeah.
he's not even at the peak of his powers. And I think he's made All NBA 5 out of his first 6 years, and he's the only player to do that. Like he's kind of he's insane, and he's been hobbled for the majority of this playoffs, and yeah, he's still kind of landing strictly on his left foot, but I think he's figured it out. And like they did a really good job in the series hiding him against Rudy and just saying, hey, if Rudy's going to score on us, then we'll take it. Like, but no one else will put our best defenders around everyone else. So it was interesting how the Mavs approached it. I think that's just great coaching. Kid came out with a good game plan for how they were going to handle this team. It won't be as easy against the Celtics when all 5 guys can score from all different levels. So it will be interesting how the matchups line up, and we'll preview that. But that's something that they were able to take advantage of it from actually pretty much every series that they went through with the Clippers, the Thunder, and the Wolves. They had 1 or 2 guys they could kind of put Luke on and just say, hey, hide here. Heal, stay healthy over here. So they're going to run into a different problem with Boston. That's all I got to say.
No, they absolutely will. And Boston's going to be the biggest test for him. But, I am a firm believer in the, I guess, when you've just been on a run like this that the Mavericks are on, you just take a little bit more momentum going into the next series. Now, I want to kind of highlight this run that the Mavericks are on for a second. So the Mavs in the first round beat the 4-headed dragon. I say 4-headed. Russell Westbrook is still a great player, but he was coming off the bench, which I think he's a better role in. They beat the 4-headed dragon LA Clippers in round 1, featuring Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, James Harden, and obviously Russell Westbrook. They then go on to beat the number 1 seed Oklahoma City Thunder in round 2 pretty convincingly. And that team was not an easy team to beat. Obviously, they had an amazing season, and in the first round, they looked like they could actually do something. They then go on to take down a defensive beast of a team in Minnesota that we've just talked about and have been on an absolute tear this year. They now advance to the finals against the Boston Celtics. It reminds me of a run that happened back in 2010, 2011. Marcos, do you remember that run?
Oh, yes. The Dallas Mavericks, led by their current head coach now, Jason Kidd, when they took out the new super team, the Heatles, when they first joined up. That was an awesome series.
Yeah. So that run was interesting because, like you said, Jason Kidd was on the team, and then Dirk and Co. So let me just talk about that one for a second. Round 1, they had a dance with the Blazers, featuring LaMarcus Aldridge and Brandon Roy. Round 2 was a rout of the 2-seeded Kobe and company.
I remember that. Yeah,
that was amazing. Like, that was already a shocker. It was like, wow, look what they just did to the Lakers. They then go on to round 3, a statement versus probably the biggest what-if team in NBA history, the Oklahoma City Thunder, with Kevin Durant, James Harden, Russell Westbrook, and
that was my favorite
really
team.
good supporting cast. Yeah, and I remember you were a
I was
major OKC fan.
Huge, bro.
Yeah. And so they
I
then go
remember
on,
that.
advance to the NBA Finals with a deadly matchup against a three-headed dragon in Miami of LeBron, Wade, and Chris Bosh. The Mavs go on to win that 4-2. It just, I'm looking at that run and I'm looking at the run that the Mavs are on this year. It looks so similar.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's an opportunity, right? Like it'll be, and in the storyline of it all, the East Coast team, the Boston Celtics, have had a very dominating season, and all the expectations are like, hey, Boston's going to win this series, so it'll be interesting. But I remember that. I remember that run so vividly, and watching
Yeah.
the finals. Oh man, that team was great. They had JT, Sean Marion, Tyson Chandler. That was a nice little team.
Peja Stojakovic, baby.
Oh, that's right. He was.
His first ring. And that was,
Yeah.
I remember, so I was a Dallas fan in round 2 because I hated the Lakers, right? And then against Miami, I remember my dad and I were just the biggest Mavs fans in that series because
Same.
nobody really wanted to see Miami win that. They had built
Yeah.
the first super team we'd seen in years. And I say built, they bought. They
Yeah.
bought that team. And it didn't seem right for the league. It didn't feel right. It was pretty fresh. And yeah, they just went on to do something that nobody expected to happen. And it just felt so magical.
Yeah, seriously. And I'm trying to think too, like at the time when they beat the Lakers, that was even more surprising because the Lakers were defending back-to-back champions. Like they were ready, they were on the quest for the three-peat.
Yeah.
And that Kobe was at the peak. Oop. And Kobe was at the peak of his powers then. So it was definitely interesting, like when you think of that Mavs team, and that cemented Dirk's legacy for sure as like one of the best
Yes.
European players and the ultimate hero for the franchise. And Luka has an opportunity to kind of take that from him, like to be the best playoff performer. He already leads. He already has the franchise record in assists in the playoffs. So it's really crazy to me. And he leads the entire playoff field in points, rebounds, and assists right now. Like he's playing,
It's amazing.
and he's been injured like this entire time.
Yeah.
Like, and him and Kyrie are the first duo to score 35 plus in 35 plus in a conference finals since Shaq and Kobe did it against the Blazers back in 2002, I believe it was.
I've got to say, man, that gamble that they took last year getting Kyrie, I didn't think it would work out. I mean, I don't think a majority of us as NBA fans could honestly say that we thought this was going to work to their advantage. Kyrie coming into Dallas on just weird terms, like he just wasn't necessarily the most positive guy. And he just seemed a little toxic to some locker rooms and franchises from some of the past things he was doing in a couple teams before that. Comes into this situation, and it's like two ball dominant players working next to each other in a starting lineup. But we've seen this before and it never works. Why do you think this is going to work now?
Mm-hmm.
And wow, it just looks great right now.
It's very much like, it's almost like the reverse of what Kyrie did when he won his first title. He was LeBron's Robin, and he's also Luka's Robin, to say the least, but he was like the mentor. He kind of took Luka under his wing and showed Luka how to be a better pro. And it's weird because his stint with the Mavs, now that it's been just over a year, is kind of like the Kyrie Irving redemption tour. Like his image was pretty tarnished during his time in Boston and his time in Brooklyn. Like he was not the most beloved player that he was when he was in Cleveland. Like in Cleveland, everybody loved Kyrie. They appreciated Kyrie. Then the whole drama with LeBron leaving and all that stuff. But like once he got to Boston, the culture was terrible. And then once he got to Brooklyn, like they were just hurt all the time, and nobody liked Kyrie. But now he's here, and everyone, I think there's kind of been like a reappreciation of just how talented he really is. I mean, that's, for me, that's how I feel. It's almost like I've disrespected Kyrie's like impact, because now he's showing this, he's showing exactly how he, like the peak of his powers again. I didn't think he could reach this level again, and he's been doing it so consistently.
Yeah, and to me, like on my side, I don't even look at the skill level. Like, yes, he's an amazing player, and yes, I think he's right up there where you're saying. I'm actually looking at the leadership side of things. I'm seeing a leader come out of Kyrie that I haven't seen him do in his years in the league, and that's to me cooler than anything. Like seeing what he's doing for this Mavs team. Everybody on that team is bought in. I mean, from top to bottom.
And that's why you make some moves. That's why you take risks, right? And we're going to talk about, at least I have a take about this later when we talk about Mike Brown. But like, the Mavs took a risk and got PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford. I've been saying this since the trade deadline. Like, this is, and it worked beautifully. Like, obviously it doesn't always work. Like, I'll be the first to admit that, but this is why you take risks sometimes. And they paired Luka and Kyrie and said, "Hey, now you guys can play your style truly, because we have these role players that actually fit and will play hard for you." Derek Jones and PJ Washington just locking down on defense. Daniel Gafford, Derek Lively stepping up into different roles. Derek Lively's been extremely impressive. Like, they had Josh Green. Like, they have a good core that knows exactly what they're supposed to do. And which is interesting because you see guys like, we're hardly even seeing Tim Hardaway anymore. Dante Exum's not really seeing the floor. So they kind of found their guys, and they found them at the right time. And I didn't anticipate that they would lock up the Wolves as well as they did. And obviously Ant kind of got his later, but I don't know, man. Like, the Mavs kind of showed their versatility, and it will be interesting with Boston. I think this was the best possible outcome. I think with the level of experience on both sides, I think we got the two best remaining duos left. I'm really excited to just see how this goes, because if Dallas wins, it's going to be very interesting how this offseason goes for them. But they're also in a really good spot. Like you mentioned, like, when they brought in Kyrie, they're like, oh, like, okay, you're bringing in Kyrie, you're setting up this kind of culture. And then everyone, knows this infamous, like, they purposely tanked out of the playoffs last year so then they can keep their lottery pick. And then they ended up with Derek Lively, and look how that worked out. Like, they had their own process and they took their own risks, and it worked out. So, that's more power to them for, being ballsy and just not being afraid to, they had a vision and they made it work. So I was really surprised.
I don't think you and I can highlight enough how important it is sometimes to just take that damn risk. I mean, like, honestly, man, it's frustrating because, we're Kings fans, and the Kings in the past 20 years have really only taken one big risk, and it worked out really well for them. They got Sabonis out of it. It worked really well. Let's take a few more risks, right?
Right.
Look, the sports world is about taking risks, and it works out or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, you adjust and you go from there. Being complacent and running the same teams back over and over and over again, it's never going to work, because other teams are constantly shifting. Other teams they're always making changes. Every team is always getting better. They may regress a few years, but they're gonna work to get better, and they're gonna take those risks as time goes on. And that's the frustrating part about the Kings, is we were so bad for so long. You'd think, like, it's just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks, but they don't do that at times. And we'll talk about that Mike Brown contract situation here in a little bit. But ultimately, just to kind of wrap up this discussion on this series, I'm happy about where both teams are at. I think. I think neither team is in a bad spot. Minnesota's not in a bad spot, because whether you keep Towns or not, you're still probably going to be a playoff team, and you're probably going to be top 5, because Anthony Edwards is only going to get better. And looking on the other side, Dallas, they're just on an absolute tear right now, on another historical run. It's going to be interesting to see what they do against the number 1 rated defense. But it's going to be exciting, man.
Well, I mean, and more credit to them too, because they beat the best defensive team in the West.
They did.
And that's something that, like, that's why I believe the Wolves will be good too, because Chris Finch has proven to be a really good coach who has gotten to these guys and has preached a system that they've bought into. And I think, especially with the more years Anthony Edwards gets under his belt, the more experience, he's only going to get better. And he's only 22. Like, Luka is 25. Like, he's gotten his, he has his legs under him now in the NBA, and he was already killing it for so long. So, the Wolves are in a good spot, and the Mavs are in a good spot. And the Mavs are kind of always in a good spot so long as Luka and Kyrie are healthy. Like, that's just kind of how it is now. They kind of established themselves. Everyone's talking about them now as like, oh, are they the best backcourt in history just because
Yeah.
of the level that they can reach? And we still haven't even, like, Luka's averaging like a 33, 12, and 8, you know, stat line throughout the playoffs, but we still haven't even had that like 50-piece game. And I feel like in game 5 he would have had it been closer, like had the game been a little bit more contested, because he was absolutely doing everything. But it'll be interesting to see if he just goes full god mode in against the Celtics. But the Celtics have two dudes who are equally capable of doing the same thing, so it's gonna be fun. Like, I'm hyped for it.
Yeah, for sure. I got one question to throw at you though, and
Okay.
it's you're gonna have to react to it and respond to it on the spot.
Okay.
Um,
I'm here for it.
who do you take in a 2v2? And these are take into consideration the prime, okay? Prime of all these players.
Oh.
Kyrie and Luca,
Mm-hmm.
Clay and Steph.
Oh. Probably Kyrie and Luca, only because like Steph is insane. His prime Steph is awesome, but prime Kyrie is also awesome. And then I think Luca trumps Thompson pretty easily in
Mhm.
like a 2v2. Prime Thompson was awesome, but at the same time, and like defensively, he probably could keep up with Luca before the injury. But no, I think Luca and Kyrie are both just more versatile. Steph would have to carry that 2v2 if it was just a 2v2.
Does that change if it's Kyrie right now?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think Luca's that good.
Yeah, no, that's
Yeah,
fair.
I
Love
think
that.
Luca would be the best player there.
Yeah.
So, all right. So we're ready to move on from that, because we're definitely going to get into it next week. We're gonna do our next pod on Wednesday before game 1, so we can do a full preview and just kind of see. We'll make our predictions and go from there. All right. So let's enter this is a new segment that we're doing. It's a segment that a lot of podcasts like to do, but we've never done it ourselves. So this is going to be a would you rather, and it's featuring our boy De'Aaron Fox. So give me a second to pull this up. And for context, Ben has yet to see this. So I have, just to explain a little bit, I picked 10 players to pair alongside De'Aaron Fox, and I'm asking Ben, and I will also make my picks as well, of who would you rather have? And I want, and just to set a rule here, because like there's a lot of what ifs we could do in here. I'm talking about would you rather as of right now, today, like who they are now. You can consider their potential when picking their guy, or you could, if you really want to factor in their past and think that it'll carry, that's fine too. But I'm talking about their version that they are right now, if that makes
Okay.
sense. All right. So let's get into it here. So let's talk about Foxy a little bit here. Which I just wanted to throw his stats up on the board for this season, because it just kind of emphasized, like, it felt like a down year at times, but he really did have another improvement of a year, with career high in points per game, career high in rebounds. He led the league in steals per game, which is also a career high for him as well. And he shot at a career high for his 3-point percentage too. And that's saying a lot, because he jumped up 5 percentage points, even though he shot, at times a little, inconsistently. He was an all-star snub and an all NBA snub. I had to put that up there. I definitely, felt like it was,
You're not salty.
yeah, no, not at all. Just felt like it was necessary. All right. So let's
Agreed.
get down to the first would you rather, okay? Here we go. So I wanted to do this to you. De'Aaron Fox's stats are always going to be on the left end before we really get into this. For all of you listening on audio and who want to check this out, because I'm doing a screen share for Ben to see, we're going to put this up on YouTube. If you guys want to check it out there, you'll definitely get all of it and see how our reactions and everything as we go here. So, Ben, you got Fox's stats on the left. Do you want to take any guesses on whose stats are on the right?
I don't know why, but I'm thinking it might be like
Oh, and to also help you out, it's only guards, like mainly point guards, a couple shooting guards in here. So that's just as a hint here.
okay.
So it's nothing crazy.
So I'm thinking DeJounte Murray.
Okay. Let's see here. Would you rather our boy De'Aaron or Tyrese Halliburton?
This one's not even close for me. I'm
No,
taking
it's
De'Aaron
not.
Fox
Same. I will
all
also
the time.
pick I will all definitely pick De'Aaron Fox. I thought this would be a fun one to start with. Obviously, their names will be forever linked, especially since the trade and the Kings picking Foxy over Halliburton. So, I thought this was a good warm up to start before we get into the nitty gritty of it all. All right. Would you? Okay. Want to take a crack at who
For
that
the
might be?
for the record, too, I'm also considering the current team that the Kings have. I'm not thinking about like future teams
It's a
or
good
putting
point.
other players around them. So this is factoring into my decisions. But 25, 6 assists, 3 rebounds, 1 steal.
A lot of these guys are closer than you think. When you look at these players, you're like, oh, like wow, they were close to the stats that De'Aaron had. So I thought it was an interesting exercise when picking these dudes.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
I don't
I'm
think
gonna
you're.
say
Yeah.
I'm Jamal Murray.
Okay, that was a good one. Would you rather our boy De'Aaron or Tyrese Maxey?
Okay.
And I did put their ages up there because I did think that's an important point to reference because when picking teams or picking players, some people do consider the youth or the age in this thing. And there's a mixture of younger players and older players in this exercise. So I wanted to throw that out there.
Well, and age definitely plays a factor, man. I mean, I'm not saying that Foxy's, coming down or anything like that, but
He's
I'm
just
sorry,
entering his prime.
a guy who's 23 years old, who's putting up points and assists and rebounds and steals like this, numbers like this, it's tough. And I'm thinking about this. I'm going to take Foxy because I think I'm looking at fit of the team and just Foxy's speed for me, what he brings speed wise just trumps so much of what other players bring. And that's my opinion. That's my take on it. I don't know how you feel about this one.
I would also choose Foxy, and we're gonna sound a little homerish here, just because we've seen so much of Foxy's game and we've seen him develop over the years. But I like Tyrese Maxey a lot. Don't get me wrong. I think Tyrese
Same.
is improved. He's improving every year. He also has a nice burst of speed. He's a very downhill player, capable of erupting at any time. I think he's gonna grow into something special for Philly. But as of today, I would still pick Fox over Maxey for sure.
Dude, Maxey killed it this year.
That's what I'm saying. And none of these stats include playoffs. It was just regular season stats.
Yeah.
I know some guys elevate in the playoffs, but Foxy wasn't in the playoffs this year, so I didn't think it'd be a fair comparison in that sense. All right. Would you like to take a gander at who this might be?
No idea.
All right, fair enough. Would you rather De'Aaron Fox or your favorite free throw merchant, Jalen Brunson?
De'Aaron Fox.
Yes.
Yeah. I sound super homer right now, but like the three guys you put up there, the one I'm really thinking about is Tyrese Maxey. Jalen Brunson, I don't want him on this team. I like him. I don't want him on this team.
Same. And listen, like Jalen Brunson is awesome for New York, and he's had an impressive season. But he's older than Foxy too. That's something to consider too. And I understand everyone loves Jalen Brunson and what he does for New York, but I've always thought Foxy was the kind of better individual player. But Jalen has carved a role into a star player, so I'm not gonna hate on it. Some of these are, again, feelings wise, most of these are gonna lean Foxy. I'm gonna put it out there. But I'm comparing players that like receive a ton of love and receive a ton of attention in a way that Foxy doesn't. So it's just interesting to me,
Yeah, man. Do you think Jalen Brunson is getting better from here?
That's a great question. I don't know. I don't think he's reached like the peak of the ceiling, but I think he's right there. Like I don't think he has that much more to go in terms of how much more he can impact the game.
I don't think he can draw any more free throws, any more fouls.
Especially if they run the playoff whistles next year in the regular season, it won't be the same.
No kidding.
Yeah, and I mean, and I do think like part of his numbers come from injuries on the team. Like he had to shoulder a lot more than he would have normally had to if guys were healthy. Like if Julius Randle was there the whole time, it would have been a different experience, I think.
Yeah, agreed. And I think Jalen Brunson averages probably like 35 minutes or something crazy like that
That's
because,
true.
we all know how Tom runs his teams
You
into the
play more
ground.
minutes. Yeah, you play more minutes and you get more stats because of it. All
Yeah.
right. This one is going to be ruined by the first picture. So it's just to make it fair because it felt appropriate. But these guys are pretty dead on in terms of the stats. Obviously, Foxy's just a slightly better defender in this instance.
I think this is wrong, but I'm going to say Steph.
You're right, sir. It is
Nice.
De'Aaron Fox versus Steph Curry. And again, I put this up here just because of how close they are. And there is a section of the world that still would pick Steph over Foxy here. So, and I already have a feeling but it's up to you.
Oh, gosh.
Would you rather?
I think I'm taking Steph.
Really? No shot.
I
That's
think
awesome.
I don't.
And
This is
because
so
it's
hard.
right
I'm not.
now.
Yeah, that's tough because I don't want him at 36. You know what I mean? But
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
dude, he still had such a good impact on the Warriors, and like, obviously, him and Domas though, like the pick and rolls, the pick and pops, like, oh man, the dribble handoffs, the way that he separates running off screens from just Draymond, like, dude, yeah, I think I'm taking Steph here.
On this team, it makes a ton of sense, right? Because like the Warriors at the end, his numbers took a dip, um, because he had to do so much, and he just ran out of gas because he is getting older. But on a
Yeah,
youthful team like the Kings, there's a very possible opportunity where he wouldn't have to shoulder as big as a load, and he can take over when he needs to. Me personally, I'm picking Foxy. I've seen these like the matchups between these two outside of the 50-point outburst. Foxy and him have been like at level since they matched up in the
yeah,
playoffs. I think Foxy. If you asked me this last year prior to the playoffs, I still would have said Steph, no problem. But ever since that playoff series against the Warriors, Foxy and Steph have kind of been in lockstep. I'm believing what Fox is going to be. So yeah, that was good. I wanted to see how you would pick in this one. So that's good to hear.
and dude, I love watching their matchups now. Like anytime the
Mm-hmm.
Kings and the Warriors play, it's such an intense game, and yeah, watching these two go head to head is just, oh, it is primetime TV.
Oh, for sure. It's one of the most watched games of the season every single time now. It's
Yeah,
very interesting because the Kings have finally reached the level. This is one of the better rivalries in the league now.
agreed.
I wish we were more competitive when the Warriors were more competitive. It would have been even better. But it is what it is. We ended their dynasty, so I'll take that instead.
Yeah.
So I'll take that instead. All right, let's get to the next one here. This one's going to be an easy one, but I wanted to, like I said, I wanted to do a mixture of older and younger players. This player had a down year by his respects for sure.
Jamal Murray.
Our boy Foxy or Damian Lillard.
Dame. Oh shoot, this one's tough too.
Because Dame had a down year, but
He
last year
did.
he was not putting up numbers like this. He was putting up
No,
significantly better numbers.
and there's something to be said why he had a down year. Dude was in Portland for so many years, and then to go into a completely new situation, a totally different city, complete different state, like you are moving houses. There was also some personal things that got with him. Like
Mm-hmm.
there were so many factors that played into why he had a down year, and yet he was still this freaking good. Um,
I love making you think. It's great.
I'm taking Dame.
Wow, you're
Yeah,
shocking me, bro.
I know.
I would not anticipate this at all.
And
That's nuts.
all I'm thinking about are the dribble handoffs and like what it looks like for him getting open. You
Mm-hmm.
look at how many times Foxy and just anybody on this team gets open, being on the court with Domas and just being on the court in this system. I
Mm-hmm.
think a guard who can shoot the ball the way that Dame and Steph do, that's terrifying to me. Yeah, I think I'm taking Dame.
I think I'm still gonna stick with Foxy. There is one guy down the road where I probably will fold, but I think the biggest thing with Dame is that like I think Foxy's just the better defender at this stage of his career, and I also think that like I agree that Dame would work well in our system, but I just like the player that Foxy is now, but I do think Dame is still there. I do think last year was like, I think next year he's going to come back and play a lot better now that he's had a year with Giannis and them. But I do agree with your take that like the vibes were terrible all around for him. So, but I don't hate that you picked him. I'm just surprised. I was not anticipating it because out of this list, statistically, he has the worst numbers. So I thought that was the funniest part about it.
Absolutely, but he has an asterisk by this season, so I'm just gonna take this season out the out the picture, even though I shouldn't for the sake of this exercise. But I don't know, dude. I'm just thinking about Dame and Keegan and Sabonis, and I'm just like, I don't know. It looks like a really nice big three. It really does, and I know Foxy makes a really nice big three with them too. But like, gosh, there's just something about Dame on this team that I just
Logo
like.
Lillard.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like it'd be fire.
it would be. I'm not. I don't hate it. I was surprised.
That's
All
all right. I'll
right,
get lit up by Kings fans. It's gonna be great.
it's gonna be great. All right, next up here, who do you think this might be?
27 points per game, 7 assists. Oh man,
I'll give you a hint. It's a two guard.
Jaylen Brown.
All right. Would you rather our boy Foxy or one of our personal favorite players, Devin Booker?
Foxy. It's not even close. Why would you
Yeah,
put him on this list?
because I wanted to piss you off a little bit when I did
Yeah.
this list. I thought of you when doing this list. It was great.
You 100% did. You've nailed everybody so far. So
I just think that with Booker, this is because when you put these two together, they're extremely even statistically.
mm-hmm.
But like from a media perspective, Booker's just everyone's favorite player. Like he has the 70-point game and he has 50-point games like 5 times a season. Like he's just he's a different type of scorer than Foxy. But every time these guys match up, like Devin Booker always plays well against us, except recently. Like he's been fine. But I think Foxy and him, like they're comparable in their styles. I would just take the style that Foxy plays, but Devin Booker's a bucket, so I can't I just felt like it was, and he improved as a passer this year because he was their pseudo point guard. So I just thought it was interesting his development this season. I thought it was worth putting him on this list.
No, and he's thinking about him in the system and on the team right now, as it sits, it would be an interesting fit. I think it would work pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like Devin Booker.
And that's fair. That's fair. All right, this one is, I think most people in the media would select the other individual, but we've seen these dudes go toe to toe and they're very even when they play against each other.
East or West?
West.
It can't be Luka.
No, Luka is not on this list. Unfortunately,
Okay.
that's just too easy of a pick. Unfortunately.
I don't know.
All right.
I should know because it's 30 points per game.
Yes, you should, and you'll see it here. Would you rather De'Aaron Fox or SGA?
Oh my! I should have known that. I'm taking SGA, and that's kind of not close for me.
Wow, not close, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even care about the age difference. It's a 1 year advantage. But dude, what Shai Gilgeous-Alexander brings to the floor every night, like he's consistently scoring like 30, 31 points. Like if you look at his stat line, yeah, he has 30 points per game, but it seems like he always has 30 or 31 points. And dude, he led that team to the #1 overall seed. Like that, he's tough. He's a bucket, man, and he brings a lot to a team.
He plays really funky, and he's also a free throw merchant in his own right. Like he averaged like 11 free throws a game this year. Like it was pretty nuts. But he plays so downhill, and he's not afraid of contact. He attacks in a way that he's more finesse than Fox is. Fox is more like speed and grace, but Shai is kind of like Luka in the sense where they kind of just take their time in the paint and just find the shot that works best for them. And Shai's defense is comparable to Foxy's, if not better, because he's consistently in the top tier of steals every year. So This was also a tough one. I do personally think right now SGA is the better player, but every single time these two match up, it's always a wash. So it's like, who would I want on my team? It would probably be SGA, but it's really close to me. It's like this much.
It's not probably. Who are you taking?
I'm taking SGA. I don't want to, but I'm taking SGA.
You can't beat around the bush, you fox homer.
Yeah, I know. It hurts. I know. I have to be realistic. All right. Next
No, that's
up.
good. All right, this one has to be Jaylen Brown.
Would you rather De'Aaron Fox or Kyrie Irving? This was tough. Too. This was tough. I'll come out right now and say I'm actually picking Kyrie in this situation, and this is completely recency bias. But if this is what he's showing me right now at age 32, I'm taking it. Like, this dude's been a dog this entire playoffs, and there was a part of me thinking, like, intrusive thoughts, thinking like, during the Pelicans game, what if we had Kyrie instead of Fox in this situation? Like, a guy who can actually create for himself at any time and hit any shot at all three levels. Like, that's where I, like, if I were to pick right now, I would lean Kyrie. And it is all just like SGA, extremely close. But for me personally, I would pick Kyrie in this situation.
I just feel like the reason that we haven't seen, I don't want these words to come off wrong. We talked about how Kyrie hasn't been getting injured, knock on wood, this year. Like, he stayed relatively healthy. And for whatever reason, I want to believe that Luka takes more pressure off him than any of the previous guys, including LeBron, that Kyrie's played for.
Excellent
and played
point.
with. And so I'm thinking about that, and I'm taking that into consideration, and I'm putting him on the Kings team where he would have to be the number one option. And Sabonis isn't enough of the number two option to take the load off of Rhea enough. To me, I still think he would battle injury. And so it's so tough, man, because having Kyrie in Sacktown would be so electric.
That'd be so cool.
But I think I'm actually going to have to switch over to our boy De'Aaron on this one. And
that's good.
Yeah, I'm going to be a homer.
I'm glad we had different takes on this one, because making this list, I was like, man, I'm going to be debating Kyrie pretty hard on this one. I've been battling with myself the past couple days because I had the luxury of knowing what was coming. So it was hard, like, deciding up to this point. So, All right. This one's one of your personal favorite players.
Zach LaVine.
No, it's not, unfortunately. You have one more guess.
26.6. 6 assists, 5 rebounds.
These players are literally
Donovan Mitchell.
Yes, sir. Would you rather?
I'm taking Donovan Mitchell. It's not. I'm sorry, man. I just love that guy so much. He's been my favorite player ever since coming into the league, and I have paid a lot of money to go see him sitting lower courtside, not courtside, but lower in the lower bowl. Like, yeah, man.
You have his shoes, I'm pretty sure, don't you?
Yeah, I do. Those Spider ones are amazing. They're super comfortable. Haven't balled in them in a minute, but when I do, those are what I wear. Yeah, dude. Holy crap. Dude, seeing him on this team, like, I can't stress enough, like, what it looks like running a DO with, or a DH with Sabonis, like, with a lot of these guys. Seeing Donovan Mitchell do that kind of thing, he's so good in a two-man game. And that's not saying that Foxy isn't, but, like, the age is the same, essentially.
They're literally the same player, only one of them's left-handed and one of them's right.
For sure. And then let's talk about experience. Donovan Mitchell has been to the playoffs a lot. So he's got that experience, and I feel like that could take us to the next level.
There's a world where we could actually end up with both of them on our team. But
it would be insane.
If the Cavs were like, hey, let's trade, I would dump everyone to get him on board.
Would you trade Keegan?
No, I would, like,
so not everybody.
Not everybody. I would trade almost everybody, but the problem is that's probably what it would take. So that's like, but that's hard because then I'm sacrificing the size. So a lot of things would have to factor in if we get other pieces. That would have to be the question too, right? We have so many guards. I would trade Keon for him, and I'm sorry, I love Keon, but like, he's like, I'd throw Keon, Kevin, HB, and 2 firsts for Donovan.
There is very few. I talk like in our group text. I'm so toxic. I'm like, I would trade Keegan in a heartbeat for blah, blah, blah. But like, no, there is literally like 1 or 2 players like realistically that I would trade Keegan for. Donovan Mitchell is one of them.
For sure.
And I would do it pretty quickly. And I love Keegan and I love Foxy, but dude, seeing Donovan Mitchell on this team would bring me so much joy.
Good. I'm glad that you say that. That's funny. I knew this was going to be a pretty easy one for you. I would pick Foxy, and it's just because of the health in this scenario, because to me, they're both very similar kind of players. Donovan is much more downhill, much more physical. He doesn't dunk on people the way he used to, but I mean, he's still an electric player. And the playoff experience alone, like the way he can carry a whole team in the playoffs is something that this team is lacking just a little bit. We need that one guy who can outscore anybody at any time. And Donovan would add that element. And that's why I thought it would be a good little comparison here, because these two guys could be an electric pairing together, or, they could swap and still be good. So,
yeah, definitely.
All right. This is the last Would You Rather of the session. And this is another one of your favorite players, recent favorite players.
Oh, so it's not Zach LaVine.
It's not recent, not washed, recent. I will give you a hint. They were in these playoffs. That trims it down to half the teams.
That doesn't help me much.
I know. They only cuts down half the teams. Western Conference was in these playoffs.
Jamal Murray.
Jamal's one of your favorites? I didn't know that.
I've always really liked Jamal. I'm not gonna lie.
I like that. I should have put him on this list, but it's not.
I'm actually surprised that you didn't. Oh, okay, yeah.
I did Anthony Edwards for this one.
Yeah.
I thought about Jamal. I really did. I almost thought about replacing Dame with him, but
I thought we were gonna see Trae Young. I'm not gonna lie.
I thought about him too.
Trae up here.
There was honorable mentions, like Trae Young was in here. Dejounte was one of them. Jamal. Oh man, there's so many guards. That was the hard part about all this, right? Like, and there was a world where I almost thought about putting Tatum on here because him and Foxy were on the same draft class. Like, I would have done like a dishonorable mention, Foxy and Lonzo Ball, like, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I thought about it. It was hard coming down with just 10 for the guard position because there's so many good guards. But I wanted to do like a mixture of like storyline guys and older vets and a mixture of some young guys that would make sense. So
no, it's great, and it was a great mix. I will say this one's probably the second easiest for me. Dude, he has such a high ceiling, Anthony Edwards, and he already has more playoff experience than Foxy, and he's 22 years old.
Yeah.
And that's not a bash on Foxy. It's a total respect to what Ant has done in his first few seasons. Yeah, I'm taking Ant, man.
Honestly, I would too. I am going to take Ant, and it's just from what we're seeing him grow into, and he is that special player. Now, if they had swapped places right this second, the impact, we probably would have ran into the same problem against the Pelicans, right? Like, Anthony probably wouldn't be able to make the same level of impact that Foxy would have as an individual creator, but for what everyone believes Anthony Edwards is going to turn into, I don't think it's that hard of a decision. And you can slot him in a lot more spots than you can Foxy.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, that was the Would You Rather portion, De'Aaron Fox edition. That was fun. I'm glad you surprised me, to say the least.
No, that's good. I love surprising people. I will say what did surprise me, and actually not even surprise, it put in perspective how disrespected Foxy is by media, by freaking 2K video games. Like, dude's averaging so many points and assists and rebounds and steals and percentages more than a lot of these guys on these lists, and he can't even touch their social media presence, like their media love and attention. And that's, to me, I can't say it's surprising because he's in Sacramento, and like, as Sacramento fans, I know we can all relate. We know how this goes, but it pisses me off because it's like, dude, dude balls every game pretty much, and he gives everything he has like every season, and he's 100% bought into Sacramento, like the city, the franchise. And so like the love he has for the city and then the love that the city shows back to him, it pisses us off when we see him not get the love that he deserves.
Yep, I agree completely, and that's why I think these exercises are fun, because like in theory, if we're making a top, 5, top 10 list of point guards, I think most people would have Foxy on the top 10, but probably not as high as we would believe, even though the numbers back it up. He was listed as a top 25 player this year, so he does have that level of respect. But no, they put guys like Tyrese Halliburton as better than him and stuff like that. So it's just interesting, the dynamic of it all. Okay, so let's transition over to our final topic, and that was the Mike Brown contract situation. Now, let me pull up the report. So there was an original report. I forget exactly who it was from. But I have the updated article here. So there's been recent talks over the past couple weeks with Mike Brown and the Kings organization, because Mike Brown is about to enter the last year of the guaranteed portion of his 4-year contract. He was only guaranteed the first 3 years of his contract, where he's eligible for extension as of this season. So a report came out probably like 3 or 4 days ago that said the Kings have tabled their talks with Mike Brown on his extension, because they're hesitant on signing him to an extension because of how much he's asking for, and because of the success and the lack of success, I should say, that the Kings had this season in the eyes of the fan base and in the ownership. Now, they said it was his bosses. In theory, Monty's one of his bosses, but this sounds like ownership, right? This sounds like Vivek. I don't know if it's the trauma of being a Kings fan, and when Vivek entered this team, when he took over and bought this team, they were still garbage for like the first 8 years that he was here. And he's nervous. But like, now the new report came out that this is from Shams Korania of The Athletic. He's always on ESPN. He's a pretty recognizable face. So he reported here on Thursday that Sacramento offered Brown a 3-year, $21 million contract extension that would run through the 2026 to 2027 campaign. The deal also includes potential bonuses that it could increase the value to $27 million. So the base contract of it all is $7 million for 3 more years, right? This comes days after Ty Lue signed a 5-year deal for $14 million a year with the Clippers. And Mike Budenholzer signed with the Phoenix Suns for $10 million a year on his contract. Mike Brown has come out and said, I want $10 million a year. And I want to ask you, before I kind of go on this rant real quick, because I'm going to pop off on some of the things that I've seen and maybe kind of just put things into perspective. $10 million in a growing industry. The NBA is just getting more and more popular. Why aren't we paying him? Do you would you just pay him if you were in charge of the Kings in this situation? Would you just pay him $10 million a year versus $7 million?
Yeah, because if I'm being honest, $10 million is underpaying Mike Brown.
No, I agree. Okay, so the track record that he had before this speaks for himself. He's won more. His record. I don't have his actual full record, but his record's pretty legit compared to some of these other coaches. My question to Kings fans who are like, "Oh, Mike Brown needs to earn it," and we had a bad year, so he needs to show more. Who could we let's say we let Mike Brown go? Who the hell could we bring in that would do a better job than Mike Brown right now? I'm being honest.
The problem.
Coaches like Kenny Atkinson, no one that really to me moves the needle. It's not like Greg Popovich is the one coming down here to revamp Sacramento. Mike Brown took this team from fans were lucky. We were giving Dave Yeager we were about to throw him a parade for getting us 40 wins, and then Mike Brown goes ahead and leads us to our first playoff series, and the whole city is insane. We're all happy about it. And then this year, we run it back with the same exact team, obviously, a couple little tweaks, Keon, TD, stuff like that, right? Like internal. We don't make any big moves in the offseason or in the regular season. The big moves were trading for Chris Duarte, signing Sasha Vezenkov, and drafting Colby Jones. Those were the moves we made in the offseason. And then guys like Kevin Huerter and Malik Monk get hurt. They didn't get hurt last year. We've only lost 2 more games than we did last year. We were 10 games above 500 for the second consecutive year. That's insane. Like, that's a great for a team that hasn't sniffed success for 20 plus years. This is what we're doing. Yes, Ben.
Sorry, I hate to interrupt you, but some breaking news that Woj just dropped.
Did we sign him?
Sacramento Kings coach Mike Brown has agreed on a new contract that takes him through the 2026-2027 season. His agent Warren Legary tells ESPN, Brown, the 2022-2023 NBA Coach of the Year, gets a new deal with a significant raise. What those numbers are, I don't have that information right now, but
wow,
way to speak it into existence, brother.
Yes, we love the breaking news. Okay, so let's scratch everything I just said right now. I'm just dude, that's nuts. That's awesome. Thank God, because this is becoming a bigger deal than it should have been, right? So, okay, I guess let me pivot from the rant I was about to go on and go somewhere else. Great news. Happy that Mike Brown is signed. This is dumb that it got to this point in the first place, right? Like, I think that's where, like, I don't understand why we went out of our way to put ourselves in this position to kind of air out our dirty laundry when this was going to be the result to begin with. I was going to finish this rant by saying we're going to pay him anyway. So like, why drag it out any longer than we're going to?
Yeah.
I'm happy. I'm happy now.
I am too, but that's a great point in and of itself. Because it's for so many years, this place has been plotted. Sacramento's been plotted as basketball hell because of the way they do business, the way that they manage their players, their coaches, their, arenas, like everything. There's so many bad vibes that surround how we've done business for years and years. And so then you turn this corner, theoretically, where you bring in a new general manager and your owner who hasn't let the general manager be a freaking general manager for numbers and numbers of years, finally lets him do his job and gives him more reins than he's given any other general manager. And he gave it to the right guy. And don't get me wrong, he's going to give it to one of them, give it to Monty. Mm-hmm. Now you're going to pull those reins tighter because of 1 year that we didn't necessarily get worse. Everybody else got better around us. Why? Because we didn't make any moves. So what did we do? We learned something. Like that to me is kind of mind-boggling. I do kind of got to defend the other side of it for a second, because it's like, yes, why didn't you make moves, ownership? And then at the same time, you saw the same nasty, stupid habits that this team was doing all year long. That was blowing 20-point leads and coming out and not performing in the first quarter and going down a crazy amount. And you saw the same things not get addressed game in and game out, and for all 82 games. And you and I sat here and talked about, we're seeing the same thing. We're seeing the same thing. It's just, blah, 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 blah. And it got old by the end of the season where we're like, well, why did we lose? Well, we did the same thing as normal. That is a red flag. That's 100% a red flag. But
yeah,
you can't take away what Mike has done for this team, and the fact that we're even talking about being in a tough situation, having over 40 wins.
And I guess, okay, so I agree with you in terms of like the bad habits that we saw, right? But the things and like we said, making moves wasn't like, Mike Brown has I wouldn't say no say, but he's not the one making the decisions. It's Monty, right? Monty 100%. Decided not to bring these guys in. And yeah, despite these issues that we saw during the season, we only lost 2 more games. Like and then that's on top of losing our second best scorer in Malik Monk and our main rotational piece in Kevin Huerter at this, like, damn near the same time. And yet, despite that, Mike Brown was able to orchestrate almost a shift in identity where we were a defensive team. He got this team to buy in via Keon Ellis and De'Aaron Fox, and Davion finally, coming back to form, like this team bought in on defense and was a top 5 defensive team for the last month and a half of the season, which ended up making us a top 15 defensive team, middle of the road, which I can't tell you the last time the Kings were 15th or better defensively, like
Yeah.
throughout this drought that we were facing. And last year we relied strictly on offense because Mike was working with the guys that he had. It takes a bit to implement a system that's a defensive first system. Like, look at the Wolves. It took them a couple years to get to this level defensively. And it obviously took getting a few right pieces. But, like, it's not Mike Brown's fault that these guys get hurt. And it's not Mike Brown's fault that Monty didn't make any moves. You're working with the pieces that you have. And at the end of the day, it's not his fault that the players don't execute always. Now, does he need to, was there timeout issues at time? Was he letting runs get too far gone? Yes. Or were there some questionable lineup decisions at times? Sure. But I don't think he was the reason that we lost games. I think sloppy turnovers and stuff like that, like those are things that the players fundamentally practice and need to execute better on, that we were executing better last year than we were this year. And like you said, the rest of the league got better, and yet we were still only 2 games worse. It's just like, for a fan base, that was such an overreaction to like, oh, now we'll be okay without Mike Brown, as if he was the problem, and he wasn't the problem. Like, and now that he's signed, it takes away unnecessary drama that was starting to brew even more because players watch that stuff, right? Like, we're trying to keep Malik Monk here. What if we can't commit to our coach? What does that show Malik? Like, oh, we're not going to commit to the one coach who truly believes in you, who you actually get along with and allows you to play the way that you want to play. Like, those are things we got to be careful for, especially if we're trying to build.
Absolutely. And all that's 100%. I think you also got to look at it too. Contract extensions, negotiating, dude. I mean, if I go into a job interview and it goes really well, and then I'm like, well, they ask me how much you want, and I'm like, well, I want this much, and they're not meeting me, like, we're going to have negotiations. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
There's always going to be negotiation stages in everything, that any sport, any job, like in this case, it is your job.
For sure.
And so I think for them, I don't want to say it was like misreporting that came out, but tabling talks doesn't necessarily mean that we're not extending you. We're not giving you anything. Like, and that I think was where I was kind of cringing at, like, a lot of the reactions at seeing that, post come out, that report come out. Because all these Kings fans are like, well, he's gone, like he's leaving. Why would you move on from a coach like this? And blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no. They can extend him at any time. It can be right now. It can be an hour from now. It can be halfway through next year. Like, there's time to do this. He's guaranteed 1 more year with us. And so it was like, you could have potentially just tabled talks because you're like, hey, maybe he tabled him. Maybe it was, hey, let me prove to you that I'm worth a little more money than this. Like, it kind of goes both sides.
No. And okay, so, and let me be clear, because I'm arguing one side of this here. But I remember it was our group chat with Ryan, that Ryan was the one who kind of brought it to our attention at first with the whole table. He's like, oh, I can't believe they're tabling talks. And I was like, it'll be fine. That doesn't, I reacted like totally fine. Like, I'm like, oh, it'll be fine. I don't blame them for wanting him, to prove another year. Like, I was totally on that side, but I wasn't on the side that said like, oh, we'd be better off without him, or he was the reason that we're struggling, things of that nature. When I'm hearing this, when I'm seeing that from like the fan base, I'm wondering like, where do you guys get off thinking that like we're going to be better off? Like, he wasn't the reason that the culture completely shifted. And that's
100%.
where I fall. And I also agree with your statement in the sense of like, there is 2 sides to the negotiation table. I'm completely under the impression that it's Mike Brown's camp that got this information leaked to kind of get this. It wouldn't be surprising if it was his camp that kind of leaked the information to kind of put the pressure on the Kings, air out the dirty laundry a bit. Now, is that the best way to do negotiations? No, but like, the deal obviously happened, right? But it just makes me wonder, like, couldn't they just have this freaking conversation in private? and not cause this drama to make everyone be like, oh, here comes the Kings again. Like, I don't like that, especially because the past 2 years it seems like we've been turning around the culture a bit, and anything that kind of reminds me of that is just so traumatic and annoying. So,
and honestly, we were pretty blessed to have absolutely no drama around extending Sabonis.
yeah.
But because that kind of negates the point I'm about to make. But the point I'm about to make is that the leaked things from certain camps, one side or another, is just a reality, like an unfortunate reality of just negotiating contracts in the sports world.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And I mean, now we're seeing it at the coaching level. If that's the case, and this is all theoretics, we don't know for sure if Mike Brown's camp leaked anything. You know what I mean? But
Right,
it's
exactly.
It's like this is a reality of where we're at, where the sports world is at. Is you're going to hear all these reports that are realistically probably just rumors, that are realistically leaks, that like may not have anything to do with what's actually happening.
Right.
It's just to push a point. It's just to push a conversation sooner than that they actually want it to happen. Like, social media has an enormous presence to the point where, like, you don't want to talk to me, you don't want to pick up my phone calls, well, I'm gonna leak that. And then it's like, oh, so and so's team is not picking up calls, and are they back to their old ways? Well, no, we're not. We're trying to get players in the door. Like, all right, what's going on? Let's talk, kind of thing. So could very well have been something like that, because I do believe the Kings have turned the corner and are continuing to turn the corner and make better habits off of a decade and a half of terrible, franchise organization habits. But yeah, look, the reality is now he's here for a long time.
I'm
I
cool
don't know
with
what
it.
that looks like. I still haven't seen anything. I've been keeping an eye.
But
it does sound like it'll be long term.
It looks like, okay, based off of Shams, I just see one here, 3-year, $30 million. So he did get the $10 million that he was wanting. So there we go. That's all it took.
Okay.
Oh,
I see
incentives.
That's interesting. I see.
Did he get more?
Woj said, yeah, Mike Brown gets a $4 million raise to $8.5 million.
Okay.
For the 2024.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So that increases his base salary. That's nice.
Yeah. Okay. It's a nice little bone. It's a nice raise for him, and he does deserve it. I mean, he's the best coach that's come in through Sacramento since Rick Adelman, and it's not close.
I just think that so if there's one place on a team that continuity, when things are going well, that continuity matters, is the coaching position. I do think when it comes to players, I think, like, for this team in general, for the way this season went, I think that, like, as fans, we were so afraid of falling back down the rabbit hole of mediocrity that they're like, man, what about this team is the problem? Like, what do we need to fix? When in reality, it might potentially be just being ballsy and taking a couple of risks here. And that's going to be, I think that also was part of the reason where, like, you mentioned this early in the season where you were like, oh, when it came to, like, moving guys in the starting lineup or potentially changing guys like this, you're like, this team has played together for so long now, they've grown, they've had this continuity, so, like, why not keep them as they are now? So but yeah, for me, and like that's a fair, logical, responsible take. Like, I appreciate that, but we just saw what happens when injuries happen, and all of a sudden that continuity gets disrupted that way, when it could have just been disrupted by adding pieces versus losing pieces. So, like, that's I guess this whole contract thing for me was more like, why are we worried about falling down that rabbit hole again when he was the entire reason we're avoiding it now moving forward? Again, I'm calming down a bit. I'm happy that he's here. I'm glad this happened. This is cool. This is the first time, like, breaking news happened, like, while we were recording, so that's actually pretty cool. I'm pretty hyped about that.
Yeah, it's cool.
God. Okay, I need to calm down now.
That's how you know we're a Sacramento Kings driven podcast. Like, we talk Niners and Eagles, but, like, where we really truly meet is that Sacramento Kings fandom. And I'm sorry, but we just spoke that into reality. Like, we got that deal done. So you're welcome, Sacramento.
Right here on this pod, it happened. Everyone was talking about it too early. We talked about it on time. Correct. This is great.
because of your raise, you can slide us a cool like 2 mil, and
Yeah.
that way we can get this up and running, like get fully going, like
Yeah, get the studio and everything. It'll be great.
exactly.
Yeah, get us in the building, Mike. You know, we push for you, brother. This is what we do here. We push for the people we appreciate. We won't let you go unappreciated, Mike. I'm really happy to see, like, again, this is an era we're not used to. We haven't had a coach. We're about to not have a coach for as long as Mike Brown, and Mike's only been here 2 years, which is so crazy to think about. So it's like, and we took chances on bad coaches. Like, I like them as human beings, but like Lou Walton was not a good coach, and we shouldn't have, gave him that big of a contract. Dave Yeager was the only other coach where I was like, I could kind of see this working out, but then they gave up on him too. So again, it's just like they gave up so fast, and I was scared that it was going to happen again. So I'm glad that it didn't happen again. I'm glad that we got to figure this out here live, which is great. I was so happy about it, though. This is is actually pretty cool.
I got to calm you down from your rant.
Yeah, I'm glad I let you speak because I was ready to go. That was freaking great. Oh God. All right. Any final thoughts before we head out here?
Nope. Let's get it.
That was great. All right, dude. With that being said, this was episode 44 of the Behind the Back podcast. You can hit us up at behindthebackpod13@gmail.com. Hit us up on any of our social medias, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, X, Facebook. For all of you on audio who would like to check out our video and everything that we put up, we've been putting up a few more would you rather topics and stuff like that. I know it's a little bit harder to catch on audio, so we tried our best there. But come check us out on video. It's a lot of fun stuff. And for those on if you are on Spotify, Amazon, Apple Podcasts, give us a like, rate the show, review. We'd love it. It helps us out a ton. If you're on YouTube, like, subscribe, give us a follow, all that fun jazz. Leave a comment below. If you agree with our would you rather takes, I don't know if, I was surprised. I thought it was going to be a lot more Foxy driven, but you surprised me, and I'm glad that you did. This was great.
And honestly, this is the week, guys. If you haven't checked out our YouTube channel, go check it out just for that. Like watching that and the presentation that Marcos threw together, it's cool, man. And seeing like all the stats and everything, go check it out, guys. It's killer.
I put a little effort in, and it's going to be stuff like that moving forward. We want to improve the production. There's going to be a lot of cool ones. This is not our only would you rather. We got Domas coming up next week. I already have a bunch of names cooked up for Ben, and he's probably going to surprise me again. So I'm actually really excited about this because this worked out a lot better. So with that being said, I am Marcos Conan. Beside me here, as always, is
Benny the Jet.
That's right. We love y'all. We're going to be talking finals next week, guys. This is going to be fun and sad because the season's coming to an end. So either way. But it's okay. We love you guys. We'll talk to you next week. Peace.